The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystalline floor, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into artificial starlight that mimicked the home systems of a dozen different species. Ambassador Zethkar adjusted his ceremonial robes, the iridescent fabric catching the light as he prepared to deliver what he considered the most obvious verdict in Council history. Before him, suspended in a containment field, floated the remnants of what the humans called their greatest achievement. The twisted metal barely resembled a starship anymore. Scorch marks covered every surface, entire sections had been blown away, and what remained looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by a stellar forge. The humans had dared to call this pathetic wreckage the UES Defiance, as if giving it a proud name could hide its fundamental inadequacy. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, Zethkar began, his 4 arms spreading wide in the traditional gesture of absolute certainty. We have before us the culmination of humanity's efforts to join our great civilization. After 3 centuries of guidance, resources, and patience from our member species, this is what they have produced. Murmurs of disdain rippled through the assembled delegates. The Veltar representative, a serpentine being whose scales shifted color with emotion, displayed the deep purple of disgust. The crystalline Zan delegation resonated with harmonics that translated roughly to pathetic waste of resources. Even the normally diplomatic Altarians seemed to have trouble maintaining their composure, their tentacles writhing with barely contained contempt. Zethkar gestured toward the wreckage with 2 of his hands while the other 2 accessed his data tablet. Let us review the facts. Humanity was discovered in the year 2157 by our expansion fleets, a primitive species barely capable of crude chemical propulsion. They had not even mastered their own planet's climate, were engaged in constant warfare among themselves, and showed all the hallmarks of a species destined for self-destruction. The holographic display above the containment field shifted, showing images of Earth as it had been 3 centuries ago. Polluted skies, devastated landscapes, massive military installations, and cities choked with primitive technology. Several council members made sounds of revulsion at the sight. However, Zethkar continued, the council in its infinite wisdom decided to extend our guidance to this troubled species. We provided them with clean energy technology, eliminated their resource scarcity, gave them the tools to heal their poisoned world, and offered them a path to the stars. We asked only that they prove their worth by contributing something meaningful to our great civilization. The display changed again, now showing the pristine Earth of the present day. Green continents, clear blue oceans, and gleaming cities that seemed to grow from the landscape itself rather than dominate it. It was, by any measure, a remarkable transformation. But Zethkar was far from finished. 300 years, he said, letting the words hang in the chamber's artificial atmosphere. 300 years of our resources, our technology, our patience. And what do they offer us in return? This scrap metal they dare to call a warship. He activated the technical analysis of the human vessel, and the numbers were damning. The ship's armor was composed of primitive steel alloys when any proper warship used quantum-stabilized materials. Its weapons were chemical-based projectiles rather than proper energy weapons. Its propulsion system relied on crude fusion rockets instead of gravity manipulation drives. The life support systems were so basic they might have been designed by children. The ship's maximum velocity is barely 1/10 that of our slowest cargo haulers, Zethkar announced, his voice dripping with condescension. Its weapons cannot penetrate even civilian-grade shielding. Its armor would be melted by a mining laser. And its crew complement of 1,000 beings is absurdly large for a vessel of this limited capability. The Veltar representative spoke up, their translator rendering their hissing speech in a standard galactic. Perhaps the humans simply lack the intellectual capacity to properly utilize our gifts. Some species are inherently limited in their potential. Agreeable sounds echoed from around the chamber. The Zan delegates' crystalline form pulsed with what their translators indicated as smugness. Our projections showed this outcome was highly probable. Humans possess certain aggressive tendencies that we hoped might be useful in military applications, but clearly their primitive nature cannot be overcome through external assistance alone. Zitkar Nodingrivli. Indeed. And let us not forget the recent incident that brought this wreckage before us. The humans were granted permission to conduct a training exercise in the Kepler Nebula region, a safe area of space with no strategic value, no inhabited systems, and no resources worth claiming. Even there, even the safest possible environment, they managed to utterly destroy their vessel. The holographic display shifted to show the Kepler Nebula, a swirling mass of colorful gases and stellar debris that stretched across several light years. It was indeed considered a backwater region, useful only for stellar cartography training and basic navigation exercises. The kind of place where even the most incompetent species could operate without causing serious damage. According to their own reports, Zethkar continued, they encountered a minor technical malfunction that resulted in the complete destruction of their ship and the loss of their entire crew. They claimed that emergency protocols saved the crew, but, of course, they cannot provide any evidence of this. The humans have a documented tendency toward creative interpretations of reality when it comes to their failures. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The humans' optimistic reporting of disasters was something of a running joke among council species. Their ability to describe complete failures as learning experiences and valuable data collection opportunities had become legendary. The question before us today, Zethkar said, raising his voice to restore order, is whether humanity has demonstrated sufficient competence to warrant continued investment of council resources. After 3 centuries of support, they have produced exactly one functioning starship, and they promptly destroyed it in the simplest possible training scenario. He paused for effect, scanning the assembled delegates with his compound eyes. I submit to this distinguished body that humanity has proven themselves unworthy of council membership. They are a resource drain with no capacity for meaningful contribution to our civilization. They cannot build proper starships, cannot conduct simple operations without catastrophic failure, and cannot even provide accurate reports of their own incompetence. The Altarian delegates' tentacles formed what their translators indicated was a gesture of reluctant agreement. While our species has always favored a patient approach to developing member species, even our tolerance has limits. The humans have shown no meaningful progress in 300 years. Perhaps it is time to redirect our resources to more promising species. The question, interjected the Zan delegate, is what to do with them. Simply abandoning a species we have already contacted would set an unfortunate precedent. However, full membership is clearly impossible. Zethkar had been anticipating this question. I propose that humanity be granted associate status. They may continue to inhabit their single world under council protection, but they will receive no further technological assistance, no resource allocations, and no consideration for expansion rights. They will serve as a useful example to other developing species of the consequences of failing to meet council standards. The proposal was met with general approval. Associate status was essentially a polite form of exile, allowing the council to maintain its reputation for benevolence, while ensuring that humanity's weakness could not contaminate the greater galactic community. Before we vote, the Veltar representative said, perhaps we should review the humans' final transmission from their doomed vessel. Their communications were illuminating. Zethkar activated the audio system, and the chamber filled with the crackling static of a badly damaged communication array. Through the interference, a human voice could be heard, speaking in their primitive language with what the translators rendered as remarkable calm given their desperate situation. Houston Control, this is Captain Sarah Chun aboard the U.S. Defiance. We have encountered an unexpected situation in the Kepler Nebula. Long-range sensors have detected what appear to be artificial structures deep within the nebula's core. The objects are massive, roughly the size of small moons, and they are moving in coordinated patterns that suggest intelligence. Static burst across the transmission, followed by the sound of alarms and human voices shouting in the background. When Captain Chen's voice returned, it carried a note of urgency that the translators struggled to convey. Houston, the objects are responding to our presence. They have altered course and are approaching our position. We are attempting to establish communication, but they are not responding to any standard protocols. Their technology appears to be beyond our current understanding. More static than we are taking defensive positions. The objects have begun emitting energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Our instruments are detecting massive gravitational anomalies. Whatever these things are, they predate any known civilization in this region. A new voice cut through the transmission, this one speaking rapidly in technical terminology that the translators rendered as urgent tactical reporting. Captain, we have multiple contacts emerging from the nebula. Count is, Jesus, ma'am. We have over 200 objects, all matching the profile of the first group. They're surrounding us. Captain Chen's voice returned, steady despite the chaos audible in the background. Houston Control, we are outnumbered and outgunned by unknown entities of apparently ancient origin. Request immediate assistance from any Council forces in the region. We will attempt to gather intelligence while maintaining defensive posture. The transmission dissolved into static and emergency tones, then cut off entirely. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had not simply destroyed their ship through incompetence. They had encountered something in the Kepler Nebula, something that had destroyed them. Zethkar quickly regained his composure. As you can see, the humans' flair for dramatic storytelling remained intact even in their final moments. Ancient entities in the Kepler Nebula? Coordinated moon-sized objects? Clearly, their technical malfunction caused hallucinations or equipment failure that led them to invent this elaborate fiction rather than admit their own inadequacy. The explanation was met with nods of agreement, though a few delegates looked troubled. The Kepler Nebula had been surveyed dozens of times over the centuries by various Council species. Nothing had ever been found there except gas, dust, and the occasional asteroid. Nevertheless, the Zan delegate resonated. Perhaps a follow-up survey of the region would be prudent. If the humans encountered some natural phenomenon that we have not previously cataloged, it could be valuable for our databases. Agreed, Zethkar said dismissively. A single patrol vessel can conduct a routine sweep of the area within the next few months. I'm certain we will find nothing more threatening than a cosmic dust storm or unusual radiation burst. The vote proceeded as expected. Humanity was stripped of candidate status and relegated to associate membership by a margin of 47-3, with 2 abstentions. The decision was final and irreversible under Council law. Humanity would remain trapped on their single world, cut off from the stars, written off as another failed species in the long history of galactic civilization. As the delegates began filing out of the chamber, chattering about their upcoming recess and various trade negotiations, none of them noticed the subtle energy readings emanating from the wreckage of the U.S. Defiance. Deep within the twisted metal, systems that should have been completely destroyed were still functioning, still recording, still transmitting data on frequencies that Council sensors were not designed to detect. The humans had built their ship using the technology they had been given, but they had modified it in ways that no Council engineer would have thought possible. They had hidden capabilities within primitive components, disguised advanced systems as crude backups, and prepared for contingencies that more civilized species would never have considered. Captain Shun and her crew were indeed dead, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. The data they had gathered in their final moments was already speeding toward Earth through quantum channels that the Council had dismissed as too inefficient to bother monitoring. Humanity's true work was only beginning, and the galaxy would soon learn that being dismissed as worthless scrap was exactly what they had been counting on. On Earth, in a bunker buried beneath the gleaming capital city of New Geneva, Admiral Marcus Webb studied the incoming transmission with growing satisfaction. The plan had worked perfectly. The Council believed humanity to be weak, incompetent, and safely contained. They had no idea what 300 years of apparent submission had actually accomplished. Humanity had learned everything they needed to know about galactic civilization, its technology, its politics, and, most importantly, its weaknesses. They had reverse-engineered council technology in secret, improved upon it in ways their benefactors could never imagine, and prepared for the day when they would take their rightful place among the stars. The council thought they had seen humanity's greatest achievement in the wreckage of the Defiance. They were wrong. The Defiance had been humanity's most expendable asset, a deliberate sacrifice designed to maintain the illusion of weakness while gathering the final pieces of intelligence needed for what came next. Webb turned to the massive holographic display that dominated the bunker's command center. It showed the locations of 217 hidden shipyards scattered throughout Earth's solar system, each one producing vessels that made the Defiance look like a toy. The human defense fleet was already larger than any force the Council had ever assembled, and it was growing every day. But size alone would not be enough. The real advantage lay in what Captain Shun had discovered in the Kepler Nebula. The ancient entities she had encountered were not fictional, and they were not hostile. They were something far more significant. They were proof that the Council was not the apex of galactic civilization, and they held the key to technologies that would change everything. As Webb watched, new status reports flooded in from across the solar system. The asteroid belt mining operations were ahead of schedule. The Jupiter orbital platform was ready for final testing. The Mars training facilities had graduated another 10,000 pilots. And, most importantly, the deep space reconnaissance fleets were already moving toward targets the Council didn't even know existed. Humanity had been dismissed as worthless scrap, and they had used that dismissal as the perfect cover for the largest military buildup in galactic history. Soon, the Council would learn what humans were truly capable of when they stopped pretending to be grateful students and started acting like the predators they had always been. The war for humanity's freedom was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after the Council's verdict, the patrol vessel GSV Enlightened Wisdom drifted through the outer edges of the Kepler Nebula with all the enthusiasm of a bureaucrat filing routine paperwork. Captain Velthara, a Zen crystalline being whose geometric form pulsed with patterns of bored resignation, had drawn what her crew considered the galaxy's most pointless assignment. Another sensor sweep complete, announced her Altarian navigator, tentacles dancing across the control interface with practiced efficiency. No artificial objects detected. No energy signatures beyond normal stellar phenomena. No signs of the mysterious ancient entities the humans supposedly encountered. Velthara resonated with harmonics that her translator rendered as mild annoyance. Continue the search pattern. Council regulations require a complete survey of the region before we can file our negative results report. The Bridge of Enlightened Wisdom was a marvel of Council engineering, its surfaces flowing seamlessly between different gravitational orientations to accommodate the varied physiologies of her crew. Holographic displays showed the nebula's interior in perfect detail, revealing nothing more threatening than swirling gases and the occasional chunk of stellar debris. It was exactly what 3 centuries of previous surveys had found. Lieutenant Kextar, her Veltar communications officer, looked up from his station with what might have been relief if his serpentine features could express such emotions. Captain, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Council Command. We're being recalled immediately. Something about reassigning our patrol route to the vegan trade corridor. Velthara's crystalline form brightened noticeably. The vegan trade corridor was one of the most prestigious patrol assignments in Council space, full of opportunities for career advancement and actual meaningful work. Acknowledge the recall order. Set course for the nearest hyperlane anchor point. As her crew began preparing for departure, none of them noticed the subtle gravitational anomalies their sensors were registering as normal stellar phenomena. Deep within the nebula's core, massive structures older than galactic civilization remained perfectly still, their ancient systems monitoring the Council vessel's every move. They had waited millions of years for the right moment to reveal themselves. They could wait a few hours longer. The enlightened wisdom engaged its hyperdrive and vanished into the star-streaked void, carrying with it a report that would be filed, processed, and forgotten within days. The humans had been right about finding something in the Kepler Nebula, but the Council would never know it. Meanwhile, in the hidden shipyards orbiting Ceres, Commander Elena Vasquez watched the final hull plates being welded onto humanity's newest warship. The UHDS Retribution was nothing like the primitive vessel the Council had examined. Where the Defiance had been crude and obvious, the Retribution was a masterpiece of concealed lethality. From the outside, it looked like a standard civilian transport, complete with fake cargo markings and deliberately inefficient engine signatures that matched outdated human technology. Inside, however, it housed weapons systems that could crack a moon in half and defenses that could absorb direct hits from Council dreadnoughts. Status report, Vasquez requested, walking along the observation deck that overlooked the construction bay. Around her, thousands of workers in environmental suits crawled over the massive vessel like antibodies repairing a wound. Chief Engineer Rodriguez pulled up a holographic interface, his fingers dancing through data streams with practiced ease. Quantum torpedo tubes are fully operational. Gravitational pulse cannons have passed all stress tests. The adaptive armor plating is responding within acceptable parameters. And the stealth systems are working so well that our own sensors can barely detect the ship when it's running silent. Vasquez nodded with satisfaction. The Retribution was just one of over 50 vessels nearing completion in hidden yards throughout the solar system. Each one represented centuries of stolen Council technology, reverse-engineered, and improved beyond recognition. The Council believed they had given humanity toys. They had no idea those toys had been rebuilt into weapons of war. "What about the crew?" she asked. "Training is ahead of schedule. The Mars facilities have been running 24-hour simulations for the past 2 years. Our pilots are already better than anything the Council has produced, mainly because they've actually had to fight for their training rather than having it handed to them. That was humanity's secret weapon, desperation. Council species had grown complacent after millennia of peace and prosperity. They trained their military forces like they were playing elaborate games, with safety protocols and careful limitations designed to prevent any actual harm. Humans trained like their survival depended on perfect performance, because it did. And the special project? Vasquez asked quietly. Rodriguez glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard, then lowered his voice. The Quantum Entanglement Communication Array is operational. We're already in contact with the entities in the Kepler Nebula. Their technology is beyond anything we imagined. The breakthrough had come from analyzing the final transmissions of the UES Defiance. Captain Chun had managed to record quantum signatures from the ancient entities before her ship was destroyed, and human scientists had used those signatures to develop a new form of faster-than-light communication. The entities called themselves the Architects, and they've been waiting for someone worthy to find them. They've agreed to the alliance? Vasquez asked. More than that. They're actively helping us. Some of the technology improvements on these ships came from their guidance. They're as interested in seeing the Council knocked down a few pegs as we are. Vasquez smiled grimly. The Council thought they ruled the galaxy, but they were about to discover that they were mere children playing with forces they didn't understand. The Architects had been building and testing civilizations for millions of years, and they had finally found one that met their standards. Across the asteroid belt, similar conversations were taking place in dozens of hidden facilities. The Titan orbital platform was preparing to launch the largest stealth fleet in galactic history. The Europa Research Station had successfully weaponized Council medical technology, turning healing nanites into targeted biological weapons that could shut down any known alien physiology. The lunar Farside installations were mass-producing quantum computers that could crack Council encryption in real time. But perhaps the most important conversation was happening in a nondescript office in Geneva, where Admiral Webb was meeting with Earth's civilian leadership for what he knew would be the last time. President Chun, Captain Sarah Chen's younger sister, elected largely because of sympathy for her family's sacrifice, sat across from him with an expression of barely controlled fury. Are you telling me that my sister's death was planned from the beginning? Webb chose his words carefully. Your sister volunteered for a mission that we knew was extremely dangerous. She understood the risks and the importance of gathering intelligence about potential threats in that region. Her sacrifice was not in vain. But you sent her there knowing she would die. We sent her there knowing that contact with the architects was necessary for humanity's survival, and that such contact required demonstrating our commitment to truth over safety. Your sister died gathering the information that will allow us to break free from Council control forever. President Chen stared at him for a long moment, then slumped back in her chair. How long before we're ready? 6 months. Maybe 8 if we encounter unexpected complications. But, Elena, you need to understand what we're about to do. This isn't just a war for independence. This is a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The Council represents everything that's wrong with advanced species: complacency, arrogance, and the belief that strength should be hidden behind politeness. And humanity represents what? Exactly. Honesty. When we want something, we take it. When we're threatened, we fight back. When we make promises, we keep them. And when someone calls us worthless scrap, we prove them wrong in the most direct way possible. President Chun stood and walked to the window, looking out over the pristine landscape of post-Council Earth. The clean cities and green forests represented everything humanity had gained from galactic civilization, but they also represented everything they had lost: their edge, their hunger, their willingness to risk everything for freedom. The casualties will be enormous, she said finally. The Council has 43 member species across 12,000 inhabited systems. Their combined military consists of approximately 8 million vessels and 4 billion trained personnel. They have controlled galactic civilization for over 50,000 years. And we have 300 operational warships, 2 million personnel, and 1 star system. But we also have something they don't: the willingness to do whatever it takes to win. Plus, we have allies they don't know about. As if summoned by his words, the office's communication system activated, displaying a holographic interface that definitely wasn't human technology. The image that formed was both beautiful and terrifying, a geometric pattern of crystalline structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human minds could comfortably process. Admiral Webb. The architect's voice resonated through quantum frequencies that bypassed normal audio entirely, speaking directly to the consciousness of everyone in the room. We have completed our evaluation of Council military capabilities. Your assessment is accurate but incomplete. President Chun stared at the impossible figure with undisguised awe and terror. This is them? This is what Sarah found. We are the architects, the entity confirmed. We have guided galactic civilization for millions of years, testing species for worthiness, discarding those who fail to meet our standards. The Council represents our greatest disappointment: a collection of species who mistake comfort for strength and confuse politeness for wisdom. And humanity? Humanity has proven themselves worthy of truth. You do not pretend that conflict can be avoided through diplomacy. You do not believe that strength should be hidden or that survival is guaranteed. You understand that freedom must be earned through sacrifice. Webb leaned forward. What about our operational timeline? Accelerated. Council intelligence has detected anomalous activity in your outer system facilities. They believe it represents increased mining operations to support your growing population, but some of their analysts are beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. You have perhaps 4 months before they discover the truth. President Chun felt her heart sink. Can we be ready in 4 months? You will have to be, the architect replied. However, we bring gifts that will improve your chances considerably. The holographic display shifted, showing technical specifications that made Webb's eyes widen. Weapons that could destroy entire fleets with single shots. Defensive systems that could render ships effectively invisible to all known detection methods. propulsion technologies that would allow human vessels to cross the galaxy in days rather than years. The cost? Webb asked because it was always a cost. When you have won your freedom, you will join us in the next phase of galactic evolution. The Council's time is ending. A new order must be established, one based on merit rather than seniority, strength rather than diplomacy. Humanity will help us remake civilization itself. President Chun stared at the display, realizing that her sister's sacrifice had set in motion events that would reshape the entire galaxy. What happens to species that don't meet your standards? They're given opportunities to prove themselves, as humanity was. Those who succeed join the new order. Those who fail, the architects form pulsed with patterns that human minds interpreted as infinite patience mixed with absolute certainty. Those who fail are no longer relevant to galactic civilization. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a war for human independence. This was the beginning of a complete transformation of galactic society, with humanity as the architect's chosen instrument of change. The Council had dismissed them as worthless scrap, never realizing they were about to become the weapon that would tear their entire civilization apart. As the architect's image faded, Webb and President Chun sat in silence, both of them understanding that they had just committed their species to a path from which there could be no return. In 4 months, humanity would either be free or extinct, and the rest of the galaxy would learn that dismissing a species as worthless was the most dangerous mistake they could make. Outside the window, the gleaming cities of Earth continued their peaceful daily routines, completely unaware that their planet had just become the center of a war that would determine the fate of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. The age of Council dominance was ending, and the age of human ascendancy was about to begin. The first sign that something had changed in human space came from the automated monitoring stations that the Council had placed throughout Earth's solar system. For 3 centuries, these stations had dutifully recorded the quiet hum of a developing civilization. Mining operations, communications traffic, the occasional research vessel testing primitive technologies. The patterns had been so consistent that most Council analysts had stopped paying attention to the reports years ago. Commander Zixtal of the Council Intelligence Division noticed the anomaly only because his automated analysis systems flagged it for review. The Felkar officer, whose insectoid features twitched with nervous energy, pulled up the data streams from the Sol System monitoring network and immediately realized something was wrong. The energy signatures were all wrong. Where there should have been the inefficient fusion reactors that humans had been using for decades, his instruments were detecting power outputs that matched advanced Council technology. Where there should have been simple chemical rockets, he was seeing gravitational distortions that suggested the humans had somehow developed their own version of Council hyperdrive systems. Most troubling of all, the communications traffic had changed. For 300 years, human transmissions have been broadcast in the clear using primitive radio and laser technologies. Now, his monitoring systems were detecting quantum-encrypted channels operating on frequencies that required extremely sophisticated equipment to generate. "This makes no sense," Zixtal muttered, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "How do humans go from chemical rockets to gravity manipulation in the span of a few months?" His assistant, a young Veltar named Silcon, slithered closer to examine the data. Perhaps they have been conducting secret research projects? The Council has provided them with educational databases containing theoretical information about advanced technologies. Theory is one thing. Actually building functional hyperdrive systems is entirely different. The precision manufacturing requirements alone should be beyond their capabilities. Zixtal highlighted several data points on his display. Look at these power signatures. They're not just using our technology, they're using improved versions of our technology. The implications were staggering. Either humanity had made impossible technological leaps in complete secrecy, or they had been lying about their capabilities for centuries. Given what Zixtal knew about human psychology from Council xenopsychology reports, the second option seemed far more likely. "Sir," Silcon said hesitantly, "should we not report this to Council Command immediately?" Zixtal hesitative. Making accusations about a Council Protectorate species without solid evidence was a career-ending mistake. But ignoring potential security threats was even worse. Prepare a preliminary intelligence assessment. Mark it as unconfirmed pending additional investigation. And activate the deep scan protocols for the Sol system. I want to know exactly what the humans have been hiding. The deep scan protocols have been designed to penetrate advanced stealth technologies and reveal hidden military installations. They had never been used on a Council Protectorate before, because such action implied suspicion of hostile intent. Using them on humanity would send a clear signal that the Council was preparing to treat them as a potential threat rather than a protected species. As the scanning arrays activated and began their methodical sweep of human space, Zixtal couldn't shake the feeling that he was already too late. The energy signatures he was seeing suggested a military buildup that had been underway for years, possibly decades. If humanity had been planning something, they had been planning it for a very long time. 3 days later, the first deep scan results arrived at Council Intelligence Headquarters on Proxima Centauri. Zixtal stared at the data in growing horror, his compound eyes struggling to process what his instruments were telling him. The humans hadn't just been hiding a few secret research projects. They had transformed their entire solar system into the largest military installation in galactic history. The asteroid belt wasn't just a mining operation. It was a network of interconnected shipyards capable of producing vessels at an unprecedented rate. The Jupiter orbital platform wasn't a research station. It was a staging area for what appeared to be the largest stealth fleet ever assembled. The Mars training facilities weren't educational centers. They were military academies producing pilots with combat experience that exceeded anything the Council military possessed. And Earth itself. Zixtal's instruments detected underground installations that stretched across entire continents, connected by transportation networks that operated on principles his species hadn't even mastered. The humans had built a war machine while pretending to be grateful students, and they had done it right under the Council's collective nose. How long? Silicon asked quietly, studying the data with the same horrified fascination. How long have they been building all this? Zixtal ran the analysis protocols again, hoping for different results. Based on the construction patterns and energy usage trends, at least 50 years for the major installations. Possibly longer. They've been preparing for war since before most of our current Council members were born. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had never been the primitive, grateful species they had pretended to be. They had used Council generosity as a cover for the largest military deception in galactic history, and they had done it so skillfully that the most advanced intelligence gathering network in the galaxy had detected nothing until it was too late. Sir, Silicon said, his serpentine form coiling with nervous energy. What do we do with this information? Before Zixtal could answer, every alarm in the intelligence center began wailing simultaneously. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in crimson warning signals as automated systems detected something that should have been impossible. Massive gravitational distortions appearing throughout Council space. The main display screen activated, showing a real-time map of the galaxy with bright red warning indicators appearing across dozens of star systems. The pattern was unmistakable. Coordinated attacks were happening simultaneously across the entire Council territory, striking at military installations, communication hubs, and command centers with precision that suggested perfect intelligence about Council defensive positions. Impossible, Zixtal breted. No species has the capability to launch simultaneous attacks across such distances. The logistics alone would require. His words were cut off as the Proxima Centauri defense grid registered incoming vessels. Not 1 or 2 scout ships, but an entire battle fleet that had somehow appeared in the system without triggering any of the early warning sensors. The ships were using stealth technology that made them effectively invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Through the observation windows of the intelligence center, Zixtal could see the human fleet materializing in orbit above the planet. Each vessel looked like nothing more than a crude cargo hauler. exactly the kind of primitive transport that humans have been using for decades. But as he watched, those innocent-looking ships began transforming. Hull plates slid aside to reveal weapon batteries that glowed with barely contained energy. Sensor arrays unfolded from hidden compartments, their sophisticated designs putting Council technology to shame. Drive systems that had appeared to be simple fusion rockets revealed themselves as advanced gravity manipulation engines capable of incredible acceleration. The largest of the human vessels, a massive dreadnought that had been disguised as a bulk cargo carrier, opened a communication channel that reached every receiver in the Proxima Centauri system. The image that appeared on screens across the planet showed a human female in military uniform, her expression carrying the calm confidence of someone who had planned for this moment for years. "Citizens of the Proxima Centauri system," she began, her voice carrying clearly despite the quantum interference that was jamming most Council communications. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Human Defense Fleet. As of this moment, this system is under human control." Zixtal felt his exoskeleton vibrate with shock. The humans hadn't just built a secret military. They had built one capable of challenging the entire Council. And they had done it all while maintaining the perfect facade of grateful, primitive protectorates. "For 300 years, Admiral Vasquez continued, humanity has served as a test case for Council benevolence. We were given technology, resources, and protection in exchange for our gratitude and subservience. We were expected to be thankful for the privilege of serving as junior partners in galactic civilization." The transmission shifted to show images of the Council chamber, where humanity had been formally dismissed from candidacy for membership. The contempt and arrogance on the delegates' faces was unmistakable, and their laughter at human failures echoed across the communication channel. "The Galactic Council has judged humanity unworthy of membership based on our failure to meet their standards of technological competence. They have condemned us to eternal isolation on our single world, dismissing us as worthless scrap unfit for galactic civilization." Admiral Vasquez's expression hardened, and, for the first time, Zixtal saw the predatory intelligence that had allowed humanity to orchestrate the largest military deception in galactic history. The Council was correct about one thing. We are not fit for their version of galactic civilization. We have no interest in being polite, diplomatic junior partners in someone else's empire. We prefer to build our own. The transmission showed real-time images from across Council space. Human fleets were emerging from hyperspace above dozens of major worlds, their vessels revealing themselves to be far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. At Altair Prime, the government district was already under occupation by human ground forces. At Vega Station, the massive orbital defense platforms were being systematically disabled by weapons that seemed to ignore their shielding entirely. "As of this moment," Admiral Vasquez announced, "the Galactic Council is dissolved. Its member species are hereby granted the opportunity to negotiate new terms of association with the Human Federation. Those who choose cooperation will find us generous partners. Those who choose resistance will discover why humanity was considered too aggressive for Council membership." Zixtal watched in stunned silence as 3 centuries of galactic order collapsed in real time. The humans hadn't just hidden their capabilities. They had deliberately cultivated the image of weakness to lull the Council into complacency. Every diplomatic failure, every technological inadequacy, every embarrassing incident had been carefully orchestrated to maintain the illusion that humanity posed no threat. The genius of it was breathtaking. By accepting the role of grateful failures, humans have been granted access to every Council world, every military installation, every strategic resource. They have been invited to study Council technology, attend Council military academies, and observe Council defensive preparations. The Council had handed them every piece of information they needed to plan the perfect conquest. "Sir," Silcon whispered, his scales shifting to the pale white of absolute terror. "What have we done?" Zixtal couldn't answer. He was too busy watching his instruments register the approach of human landing craft, their occupants no doubt coming to secure the intelligence center and its databases. In a matter of hours, centuries of council superiority had been revealed as an illusion maintained only by human restraint. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of council dominance was over, and the age of human supremacy was beginning. And it had all started with the simple decision to dismiss humanity as worthless scrap, never realizing that scrap could be forged into the weapon that would destroy them. Outside the observation windows, human vessels continued to materialize in orbit, their numbers suggesting that this was just the beginning of a military operation that spanned the entire galaxy. Somewhere in the depths of space, humanity's true fleet was revealing itself, and Zixtal suspected that what they were seeing was merely the first wave of an invasion force that could reshape galactic civilization itself. The humans had been dismissed as failures, and they had used that dismissal to engineer the most successful military coup in galactic history. As the Council's own xenopsychology reports had warned, humans were indeed too aggressive for civilized society. The Council should have listened to their own experts, but it was far too late for regrets now. The sound of human boots in the corridor outside confirmed what Zixtal already knew. The war was over before it had begun, and humanity had won so completely that most council species wouldn't even realize they had been conquered until the new order was already in place. It was, he had to admit, exactly the kind of ruthless efficiency that humanity had been famous for before the council had tried to civilize them. Perhaps, Zixtal thought, as the doors opened to admit human soldiers, the council should have left humanity's aggressive tendencies alone. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the fortress system of Kepler 442, a heavily defended star system that had served as their final retreat during the only previous galactic crisis in recorded history. The assembled delegates huddled in the Deep Space Command Center like prey animals, their once magnificent chamber replaced by the sterile efficiency of a military bunker. Ambassador Zethkar stood before the emergency assembly, his forearms trembling with barely controlled rage and disbelief. In the space of 72 hours, 3 centuries of council dominance had collapsed so completely that most member species were still trying to understand what had happened. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice carrying none of its usual condescending authority. We face a crisis unprecedented in galactic history. The humans have revealed themselves to be not the primitive failures we believe them to be, but the architects of the most sophisticated deception ever perpetrated against civilized space. The holographic display behind him showed the current tactical situation, and the images were devastating. Of the Council's 12,000-member worlds, over 8,000 were already under human occupation. The conquest hadn't been achieved through prolonged warfare, but through simultaneous surgical strikes that had crippled Council defenses before they could respond. How is this possible? Demanded the Veltar representative, her serpentine form coiled in defensive postures. Our intelligence services reported no significant military buildup in human space. Our monitoring stations detected no unusual activity. How could they have hidden preparations for an operation of this magnitude? Zethkar activated the intelligence reports that had been pouring in from across Council space. According to our surviving analysts, the humans have been conducting their military buildup for at least a century, possibly longer. Every technological gift we provided them was reverse-engineered, improved, and weaponized. Every diplomatic exchange was an intelligence-gathering operation. Every cultural exchange program was a reconnaissance mission. The Altarian delegates' tentacles writhed with what their translators rendered as existential horror. You're saying that for 300 years, we weren't civilizing humanity. Humanity was studying us. Worse than that, Zethkar replied grimly. We were funding their preparations. Every resource allocation, every technological transfer, every educational grant was being used to build the military force that has now conquered us. We didn't just fail to prevent this. We made it possible. The implications were staggering. The Council's entire philosophy of benevolent guidance had been turned against them with devastating efficiency. By trying to uplift humanity, they had created their own destroyers. "What of our military forces?" asked the crystalline's delegate, her form pulsing with frequencies that indicated barely controlled panic. "Surely our combined fleets can mount a counteroffensive?" Zethkar's response came with the weight of absolute defeat. "Our military forces were designed for peacekeeping operations and defensive actions against primitive threats. Human weapons technology appears to be centuries ahead of our own. Their vessels move faster than our sensors can track them. Their weapons penetrate our shields as if they didn't exist. And their tactical doctrine is based on principles that our military planners never anticipated." He activated a recording from the Battle of Vega Station, one of the few Council installations that had managed to transmit detailed combat data before being destroyed. The footage showed Council defense platforms attempting to engage human vessels that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, phasing in and out of normal space-time to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. "They're not just using superior technology," Zethkar continued. "They're using fundamentally different approaches to warfare. While we focused on defensive strategies designed to minimize casualties, humans developed offensive doctrines designed to achieve total victory as quickly as possible. They don't fight to establish negotiating positions. They fight to win absolutely." The Veltar representative raised her head in what might have been defiance if her species were capable of such emotions. "Were their terms? Surely they must want something from us. No species conquers the galaxy without purpose. That," Zethkar said quietly, "is what makes this situation so terrifying. According to intercepted human communications, they don't want anything from us that they can't take by force. They're not seeking tribute, trade agreements, or territorial concessions. They're implementing what they call administrative reorganization of galactic civilization." The phrase hung in the chamber like a death sentence. Administrative reorganization wasn't conquest, it was replacement. The humans weren't planning to rule the existing galactic order. They were planning to replace it entirely. Specifically, Zethkar continued, consulting his data tablet with hands that shook despite his attempts at composure. "Human forces are implementing what they term competency-based governance across all occupied territories. Species that demonstrate useful capabilities are being incorporated into their new administrative structure. Species that fail to meet their standards are being relocated." The word relocated carried implications that no one in the chamber wanted to explore too deeply. The humans had studied Council policies for 3 centuries, and they had clearly learned from what they considered to be the Council's mistakes. "There is more," Zethkar said, and the chamber fell silent despite the impossibility of the situation becoming worse. "Our deep space monitoring stations had detected massive gravitational anomalies throughout the galaxy. Unknown vessels are emerging from regions of space that our surveys have marked as empty for millennia." The display shifted to show sensor readings from the outer galaxy, where massive structures were materializing from what had appeared to be empty space. The objects were clearly artificial and clearly ancient, their technology signatures unlike anything in Council databases. "The humans are not acting alone," Zethkar announced. "They have formed an alliance with entities that predate our civilization. The same entities that destroyed the UES Defiance in the Kepler Nebula. Entities that we dismissed as human fiction. The revelation sent waves of terror through the assembled delegates. If humanity alone could devastate Council civilization, the prospect of humanity backed by ancient alien technology was apocalyptic." The Zan delegate resonated with harmonics that bordered on hysteria. "What do these entities want? What are their intentions toward existing galactic civilization?" "Unknown," Zethkar replied. "However, analysis of their technology signatures suggests capabilities that make human weapons look primitive by comparison. If they chose to reveal themselves now, it suggests that they view current events as significant to their own agenda." A new voice interrupted the proceedings, speaking in perfect galactic standard despite its obvious alien origin. The chamber's communication systems activated without authorization, displaying a holographic image that hurt to look at directly. geometric patterns that seemed to exist in dimensions that three-dimensional minds couldn't properly process. "We are the architects," the entity announced, its words bypassing normal audio channels to speak directly to the consciousness of everyone present. "We have observed galactic civilization for millions of years, testing species for worthiness, evaluating their potential for growth beyond the limitations of comfortable mediocrity." The chamber fell silent, every delegate frozen by the presence of something so alien that their minds struggled to process its existence. The council represented our experiment in guided evolution, providing advanced species with the resources and security necessary for unlimited development. The results have been disappointing. Rather than using peace and prosperity to achieve greatness, you have used them as excuses for stagnation. Zethkar found his voice despite the overwhelming presence of the architect. "What did we do wrong? We eliminated warfare, hunger, scarcity. We created a stable, peaceful galactic civilization. You created a civilization afraid of its own potential," the architect replied, its form pulsing with patterns that human minds would have interpreted as disappointment. "You mistake comfort for achievement. You confuse politeness for wisdom. You have had 50,000 years to transcend your limitations, and instead you have institutionalized them." The implications were staggering. The Council hadn't been the peak of galactic civilization. They had been a failed experiment, maintained only by the patience of entities powerful enough to eliminate them at will. "Humanity represents a different approach," the architect continued. "When faced with limitations, they overcome them. When confronted with superior force, they find ways to defeat it. When dismissed as failures, they use that dismissal as a weapon. They understand that evolution requires struggle, that growth requires risk, that true civilization is earned rather than inherited." "So you're replacing us with them?" the Altarian delegate asked, tentacles writhing with emotions that had no translation in any known language. "We are providing them with the opportunity to prove themselves worthy of the role you have abdicated. Humanity will be tested as you were tested. If they succeed in creating a dynamic, growing civilization, they will earn our continued support. If they fail and become complacent as you did, they will be replaced in turn." The message was clear. Galactic civilization was not a right, but a privilege that had to be continuously earned. The Council had failed that test, and now humanity was being given their chance. "What happens to us?" Zethkar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That depends on your choices in the immediate future. Species that demonstrate useful capabilities will find places in humanity's new order. Those that resist or prove themselves incapable of adaptation will be granted the same mercy you showed to species that failed your own evaluations." The architect's image began to fade, but its final words echoed through the chamber with the weight of absolute certainty. The age of council dominance is over. The age of human ascendancy has begun. How it develops from this point depends on decisions that have yet to be made. As the presence vanished, the chamber fell into stunned silence. The assembled delegates sat in the wreckage of everything they had believed about their place in the galaxy, forced to confront the reality that they had been children playing with toys while adults decided their fate. Outside the fortress system, human fleets continued their methodical conquest of council space, their vessels moving with the precision of a force that had planned every detail of this operation for generations. They weren't just winning a war. They were implementing a new form of galactic civilization based on principles that the Council had never understood. Somewhere in the depths of space, ancient entities watched the transformation with satisfaction, pleased that their long experiment had finally produced a species worthy of the test they were about to face. Humanity had passed the first challenge by conquering those who had dismissed them as worthless scrap. But that was only the beginning of trials that would determine whether they were truly worthy of inheriting the galaxy. The Council had been found wanting, and their time was over. What remained to be seen was whether humanity could succeed where their predecessors had failed, or whether they too would eventually be dismissed as worthless scrap by forces they had yet to imagine.